I met Sophia at my friend Jake's birthday party. It was one of those connections where you look across a crowded room and just know something special is happening. We dated for a year, and I fell completely in love with her brilliant mind, kind heart, and the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. But there was one major issue. She wanted to stay a virgin until marriage because of her religious beliefs. I respected her choice, but eventually had to make the painful decision to end things. 6 months later, she texted me, wanting to reconcile with a shocking confession. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit subscribe if you want more real stories about relationships and the difficult choices we sometimes have to make. I was 28 years old and working as a software engineer at a tech company in Boston when I met Sophia. The night we met at Jake's party, I had almost decided to skip it. Work had been stressful that week and I was exhausted. But Jake insisted, saying, I needed to get out more. Thank goodness for persistent friends. The moment I walked in, I spotted her across the room talking animatedly about a book she had just finished. Her hands moved expressively as she spoke and her face lit up with passion. I found myself gravitating toward their conversation, pretending to refill my drink nearby just to hear her speak. When our eyes met, she paused mid-sentence and smiled. Jake noticed and made introductions. Ellis, this is Sophia. She teaches literature at the university. Sophia, this is Ellis, my friend from college who I am always telling you about. That night we talked for hours. We discovered we shared a love for the same obscure authors, had similar taste in documentaries, and both enjoyed hiking and cooking. By the end of the evening, I had her number and a promise for coffee the next day. Our first date at Little Brew's coffee shop was supposed to be quick. Just an hour to continue our conversation from the night before. 4 hours later, the baristas were giving us looks as they wiped down tables and prepared to close. We reluctantly said goodbye, but not before planning our next date. The first 6 months were perfect. We hiked through Acadia National Park on a long weekend, getting caught in the rain and laughing as we raced back to our cabin. I surprised her on her birthday with tickets to see her favorite author speak at a local bookstore. She taught me to make authentic pasta from scratch in my tiny apartment kitchen floor, covering both of us by the end. At the 6-month mark, Sophia introduced me to her parents. They were traditional and attended church every Sunday. I was nervous about meeting them, being raised in a household that rarely discussed religion. But they welcomed me warmly, asking about my work and seeming genuinely interested in getting to know me. Thanksgiving came around and I joined her family for dinner. Her father said grace before the meal, and though I was not used to praying, I bowed my head respectfully. Her mother pulled me aside afterward and thanked me for making Sophia so happy. I felt accepted despite our differences. As our relationship progressed, we began to talk vaguely about the future. Nothing concrete, but small comments that indicated we both saw something long-term developing. When we visit California next year, or we should get a bigger place when your lease ends. Little seeds of future plans that made me smile. It was our 8-month anniversary when things changed. I had planned a special evening at my apartment. I cooked her favorite meal, bought her favorite wine, and set up candles throughout my living room. After dinner, we moved to the couch and started kissing. As things became more passionate, Sophia suddenly pulled away. Ellis, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice soft but serious. I sat up, concerned by her tone. What is it? Is everything okay? She took a deep breath and explained that she had made a commitment to remain a virgin until marriage. It was part of her religious beliefs and a promise she had made to herself and her family. I was surprised, not because we had been physically intimate in other ways, but because this was the first time she had explicitly stated this boundary. We had been taking things slowly, and I had respected her pace without question, but now I understood why she always stopped things before they went too far. I should have told you sooner, she said, watching my face carefully. I just never found the right moment, and I was afraid it might change how you felt about me. I reassured her that while I was surprised, I respected her decision. This doesn't change how I feel about you, I said, meaning it in that moment. I care about you too much to let this be a problem. But in the weeks that followed, I found myself struggling. I had always valued physical intimacy as an important part of a relationship, and the realization that this aspect would be completely off limits until marriage was difficult to process. We established new boundaries, being clear about what was acceptable and what wasn't, but it felt constrained and unnatural compared to the easy flow we had before. I talked to my best friend Jake about it over beers one night. He thought I was crazy for considering staying in the relationship. "You are going to be constantly frustrated, man. How is that healthy for either of you?" But my brother Aaron had a different perspective when I called him. "If she is the right person, waiting would be worth it. But you need to be honest with yourself about whether you can actually do it." In an effort to adapt, I found myself on online forums reading advice from couples in similar situations. The opinions were divided. Some said it strengthened their relationship to wait, while others admitted it created tension that never fully resolved until after marriage. And some cautioned that sexual incompatibility discovered after marriage had led to serious problems. Our dates began to feel strained. I would find myself becoming physically excited and then immediately feeling guilty for wanting something Sophia had clearly stated she wasn't comfortable with. She noticed the change in my demeanor, the way I would sometimes pull away first to avoid the frustration of another encounter that would leave me taking a cold shower afterward. One night we were watching a movie that included a passionate love scene. I felt Sophia tense beside me, and when I glanced over, she was watching me instead of the screen, concern evident in her expression. "Does it bother you?" she asked quietly, knowing that we won't. Sometimes I admitted not wanting to lie, not because I don't respect your choice, but because I care about you and want to express that in every way possible. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I wish I could give you what you want, but I just can't compromise on this." I tried to understand her faith more deeply, reading books about her denomination, and even attending church with her a few times. I could appreciate the sense of community and tradition, but I couldn't internalize the beliefs that informed her decision. We tried to find alternative ways to express our affection, but the underlying tension remained. As our one-year anniversary approached, I found myself increasingly unable to ignore the physical frustration I was experiencing. What had seemed manageable at first was now a constant source of stress. I loved Sophia deeply, but I couldn't imagine several more years of this tension if we continued dating with marriage as a distant prospect. The breaking point came after our anniversary dinner. We had returned to my apartment, and in a moment of weakness, I suggested we could try some things that wouldn't technically violate her commitment. It was the wrong thing to say, and I knew it immediately from the hurt that flashed across her face. "Do you think this is just some technicality to work around?" she asked, her voice rising. "This is my faith, Ellis. My commitment to God, not a rule to find loopholes in." I apologized profusely, but the damage was done. For the next 2 weeks, our communication was strained. We texted instead of calling. Our conversations felt surface level. When we did see each other, there was an uncomfortable distance between us. Sophia tried to bridge the gap. She suggested alternative ways we could be physically affectionate without crossing her boundaries. But I was beginning to realize that these compromises weren't enough for me. It wasn't just about the physical act itself, but what it represented: a complete emotional and physical connection that I deeply valued in a relationship. I found myself noticing the deeper differences in our values that extended beyond just this one issue. Sophia envisioned a future with children, raised in the church Sunday mornings spent in worship, and lives guided by biblical principles. While I respected her vision, I wasn't sure it aligned with mine. The stress began to affect me physically. I had trouble sleeping often, lying awake thinking about our relationship. I became irritable at work and found myself snapping at colleagues over minor issues. This wasn't like me, and I knew something had to change. I called my brother Aaron, hoping for clarity. "You seem to already know what you need to do," he said after listening to me vent. "But you are afraid of hurting her. Ask yourself this: if she is the right person, would you be willing to wait? Not just willing, but happy to wait because she is worth it." His question stayed with me for days. I also reached out to my ex-girlfriend Tracy, wanting a female perspective. Her response was blunt. "Physical incompatibility is a real thing, Ellis. It is not shallow to acknowledge that your needs are different. Better to face that now than after marriage." I bought a book about love languages, and realized Sophia and I expressed and received love in fundamentally different ways. Physical touch was high on my list of how I both gave and received affection. For Sophia, it was words of affirmation and acts of service. This difference might have been manageable if physical intimacy was at least part of our future before marriage. But with that off the table indefinitely, I wasn't sure we could bridge the gap. In a last-ditch effort to reconnect, I suggested a weekend camping trip to the White Mountains. I thought perhaps away from distractions in the beauty of nature we might find a way forward. The first day was wonderful. We hiked trails with breathtaking views, cooked meals over a campfire, and talked about light topics like we used to before all this tension. But as we sat by the fire that night, the stars brilliant above us, the conversation inevitably turned to the elephant in the room. "I am struggling, Sophia," I admitted, poking at the embers with a stick. "I want to be the person who can wait and be okay with it, but I am not sure that I can." She moved closer, laying her head on my shoulder. "I understand, Ellis. I wish I could change how I feel, but this is too important to me." "I know," I said softly. "That is what makes this so hard." We slept that night in separate sleeping bags in the same tent, an uncomfortable silence between us. The drive back to Boston the next day was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, recognizing that we had reached an impasse. For a week after the camping trip, I agonized over what to do. I loved Sophia. She was kind, brilliant, funny, and understood me in ways no one else had. But this fundamental incompatibility loomed larger each day. Finally, I made my decision. I asked Sophia to meet me at Boston Common, a park where we often walked together on weekend afternoons. When she arrived, her smile was cautious, as if she sensed what was coming. We sat on a bench, overlooking the pond, watching ducks glide across the surface. I gathered my courage and told her that while I loved her deeply, I couldn't continue in the relationship, knowing that such an important aspect of connection would be missing until marriage, which was years away. "It is not that I do not respect your decision," I explained, my voice breaking. "I do completely. But I have to be honest about what I need in a relationship too." Tears filled her eyes. "We can work through this. Maybe we could get engaged sooner or find other ways to be close." I shook my head, feeling my own eyes burning with unshed tears. "I have thought about that, but it would not be fair to either of us. You should not feel pressured to change your timeline, and I should not commit to something I am not sure I can handle." She cried openly then, and it took every ounce of willpower not to take back my words and promise to try harder. But I knew this was the right decision, even though it was breaking both our hearts. "I will always care about you," I said, holding her one last time. "But we want different things, and that is nobody's fault." Later that week, I returned a box of her things, books she had lent me, a sweater she had knitted for my birthday, small mementos from our time together. Walking back to my car in the rain after dropping them at her apartment door, I felt a hollowness in my chest that I feared might never fill. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I threw myself into work but found it difficult to concentrate. Jake and Aaron tried their best to keep my spirits up, inviting me to basketball games and guys' nights, but my heart wasn't in it. Sophia texted a few times in the first month. Simple messages asking how I was, or saying she missed me. I responded politely but briefly, knowing that prolonged contact would only make moving on harder for both of us. 2 months after our breakup, I agreed to a date with Jennifer, a colleague who had expressed interest. She was attractive and fun, and our physical chemistry was immediate. But as we continued to see each other, I realized something was missing. We did not connect on a deeper level the way Sophia and I had. After a few weeks, we amicably decided to remain friends. I still thought about Sophia often. Walking past the bookstore where we spent hours browsing or seeing her favorite ice cream flavor at the grocery store would bring a wave of sadness. Through mutual friends, I heard she had taken a teaching position at a university in Rhode Island about an hour away. I was glad she was doing well, even as I continued to question whether I had made the right choice. 6 months after our breakup, I was finally beginning to feel like myself again. Work was going well. I had taken up rock climbing as a new hobby, and I was even considering dating again this time with a clearer sense of what I wanted in a relationship. Then on a Friday night, As I was unwinding with a beer and a movie, my phone lit up with a text from Sophia. I miss you. Can we talk? My heart raced as I stared at those words. I read and reread the message at least 10 times, trying to decide how to respond. Jennifer and I had ended things a month earlier, realizing we were better as friends than partners. I had been on a few casual dates since then, but nothing serious. I stayed up half the night debating what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore the message to protect the healing I had done. Another part desperately wanted to see her again. In the morning, I called Jake for advice. Just meet her for coffee, he suggested. Hear what she has to say. You do not have to decide anything right away. After another day of deliberation, I texted back agreeing to meet. I suggested a neutral coffee shop, not Little Brews where we had our first date, but a newer place downtown that held no memories for us. When I arrived, Sophia was already there. She looked beautiful, but tired, her hair cut shorter than I remembered. She stood when she saw me, an uncertain smile on her face. For a moment, neither of us seemed to know what to do. Should we hug, shake hands? In the end, I simply sat across from her, mumbling a greeting. The first few minutes were awkward. We made small talk about the weather, her new job, my recent project at work. Gradually, the conversation began to flow more naturally, hints of our old connection shining through. I have missed this, she said suddenly. Talking to you. No one else gets my obscure literary references or laughs at my terrible puns. I smiled, feeling a familiar warmth spreading through my chest. I have missed you too, more than I expected to. She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch sending electricity through me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Ellis. About us. About what happened. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I still love you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think about you every day. My heart pounded. I still have feelings for you too, I admitted. I tried to move on, but she squeezed my hand and I noticed tears forming in her eyes. There is something I need to tell you, she said, looking down at our intertwined fingers. I felt a sudden apprehension. What is it? Sophia took a deep breath, still not meeting my eyes. 3 months after we broke up, I slept with someone. Her voice trembled. A colleague named Mark at my new university. It was after a department party. We had both been drinking, and I was so lonely and missing you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I pulled my hand away instinctively, trying to process what she was saying. It only happened once, she continued hurriedly, tears now streaming down her face, and I regretted it immediately. It made me realize how much I still love you, how much I want to be with you. I sat in stunned silence, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. It wasn't that Sophia was no longer a virgin. That was not what bothered me. It was the fact that she had held me at arm's length for our entire relationship, insisting on waiting until marriage because of her deep religious convictions, only to abandon those same convictions with someone else. Let me get this straight, I finally said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. You would not sleep with me after a year together because of your religious beliefs, but you slept with this guy after knowing him for what? A few weeks. Sophia flinched at my tone. It was a mistake, Ellis. I was trying to get over you. I thought we would never see each other again. So, your religious conviction was not actually that strong, I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Because it sure seemed unshakable when I was the one asking for intimacy. It is not that simple, she said, wiping at her tears. I was confused, hurting. I am only human. My mind was reeling. All those nights I had lain awake, frustrated but respecting her boundaries. All those cold showers and times I had pulled away from heated moments. All because I respected her beliefs, even when they were difficult for me. And now she was telling me that those beliefs had crumbled so easily with someone else. Why did we even break up then? I asked, my voice rising despite the public setting. I spent a year respecting your boundaries, Sophia. A year loving you and trying to adapt to what you needed. And then you just, what? Forgot your convictions the first time you were lonely. Other coffee shop patrons were beginning to glance our way, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Please try to understand, Sophia begged, reaching for my hand again, which I pulled away. I made a mistake. We all do. But it made me realize that what I really want is you. I am willing to change my stance on physical intimacy now. We can be together completely. I laughed bitterly. So now you are willing, now that you have already been with someone else. Do you not see how that feels to me? Sophia had no answer, just more tears and apologies. Part of me still loved her. Part of me wanted to forgive everything and take her back. But a larger part felt betrayed in a way that had nothing to do with her virginity and everything to do with consistency and honesty. I need some air, I said abruptly, standing up. She grabbed my wrist. Please do not leave like this. I looked down at her conflict raging inside me. I need time to think, I said gently, removing her hand. I walked out and got into my car but did not start it. Instead, I sat there, my head against the steering wheel, trying to sort through my chaotic thoughts. Eventually, I drove aimlessly around Boston, ending up at a parking lot overlooking the harbor. I called Jake from there, pouring out the whole story. Come over, he insisted. You should not be alone right now. At Jake's apartment, I drank too much whiskey, and for the first time in years, I cried openly. Jake said nothing, just handed me tissues and poured another drink. It is not about her sleeping with someone else, I kept saying. It is about the principle, about what that means about our entire relationship. Jake nodded understandingly. I know, man. I know. I spent that night on Jake's couch, sleeping fitfully, my dreams filled with Sophia's tear-stained face and unanswerable questions. The week following my coffee shop confrontation with Sophia, I called in sick to work. I needed space to process everything that had happened. My boss was understanding, having seen how the breakup had affected me months earlier. I spent the first 2 days in my apartment barely eating, writing in a journal to try to make sense of my thoughts. The pages became tear-stained as I poured out my confusion, anger, and lingering love for Sophia. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from her, 27 missed calls in 3 days. I silenced the notifications, knowing I could not speak to her until my mind was clearer. On the 4th day, I called Sarah, a college friend who had become a psychologist. She listened patiently as I explained the situation. Ellis, she said gently, when I finished, I think you need to separate 2 issues here. One is whether Sophia slept with someone else after you broke up, which she was free to do. The other is what this reveals about the consistency of her principles, which seems to be what is really bothering you. She was right. I was not jealous that Sophia had been with Mark. We were broken up. She owed me nothing. What hurt was realizing that the principles she had insisted were unbreakable, the ones that had ultimately ended our relationship, had been abandoned so quickly with someone else. It makes me question everything I told Sarah. Was she not attracted to me enough? Was it all an excuse? Or are her principles really that flexible? People are complex, Sarah reminded me. Sophia might have genuinely believed in waiting when she was with you. Her actions later do not necessarily invalidate that. But they do reveal something about how she handles her principles under pressure, and that is something to consider carefully. Over the next week, I read books on relationship psychology and personal values. I began meditating each morning, just 10 minutes of focusing on my breathing to calm my racing thoughts. I talked with Aaron about core values in relationships. What matters most to you, he asked. Beyond the physical, beyond the emotions, what are your non-negotiables? After much reflection, I realized that authenticity and consistency were at the top of my list. I needed to be with someone whose actions matched their words, whose principles remained steady even when tested. 2 weeks after the coffee shop meeting, I felt ready to see Sophia again. Not to reconcile, but to find closure. I texted her, "We need to talk one last time." She responded immediately, "Anywhere, anytime." We agreed to meet at Boston Harbor the next evening. The open space and fresh air felt right for what would be our final conversation. Sophia arrived looking both anxious and hopeful, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one with a tentative smile. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said. I nodded, taking the coffee, but not returning the smile. "I have been thinking a lot about us, about what happened." We walked slowly along the waterfront, the gentle lapping of waves providing a soothing background to a difficult conversation. I want you to know that I am not angry with you for sleeping with Mark. I began carefully. That is not what this is about. She looked up surprised. It is not. No. We were broken up. You were free to do whatever you wanted with whoever you wanted. I took a deep breath. What bothers me is the inconsistency. For a year you held firm to a principle that you said was fundamental to who you are. A principle that ultimately ended our relationship. And then so quickly after you abandoned it. Sophia started to speak, but I held up a hand. Let me finish, please. If your religious conviction about waiting for marriage was so easily set aside when you were lonely or hurting, then I have to question how genuine it was in the first place. And that makes me question what was really happening in our relationship. Tears filled her eyes again. I made a mistake, Ellis. I was weak. I missed you so much and I was trying to numb the pain. I understand that I said more gently now. I do. But it still reveals something important about your relationship with your own principles. If that belief could be abandoned in a moment of weakness, then it probably was not the unshakable conviction you presented it as when we were together. So you cannot forgive me, cannot give us another chance, she asked, her voice breaking. This is not about forgiveness, I said, stopping to look out over the water. I forgive you, Sophia, and part of me will always love you. But I do not think we can go back. If your principles were truly that important, you would not have broken them so easily. And if they were not that important, then why did we spend a year struggling with them? Either way, there is a fundamental disconnect that I cannot reconcile. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, wiping away tears. I understand, she finally said. I wish I could change what happened. I know, I replied, but I think this is for the best. You taught me so much about what I want in a relationship, about the importance of clear communication and shared values. I will always be grateful for that. We hugged goodbye, a brief embrace filled with the echo of what might have been. As I watched her walk away, I felt a weight lifting. There was still sadness, but also clarity and a sense of peace. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I enrolled in an Italian cooking class I had always wanted to take. I joined a weekend hiking group and made new friends as we explored the mountains of Massachusetts. I took a solo trip to Seattle, spending days walking the city and reflecting on who I wanted to be moving forward. I strengthened old friendships and built new ones. Jake, Aaron, and I started a monthly poker night that became a highlight of my social calendar. I learned to appreciate myself more, to value my own needs and desires without feeling guilty. 4 months after that final meeting with Sophia, I began dating again, this time with a clearer understanding of my values and what I was looking for in a partner. I was upfront from the beginning about my expectations and needs, making sure any potential relationship started with complete honesty. Through all of this, I came to understand that respecting someone else's values should never mean sacrificing your own. That true compatibility goes beyond attraction or shared interests. It requires alignment on fundamental principles. Most importantly, I learned that consistency between words and actions is the foundation of trust, and without trust, even the deepest love cannot survive. I do not regret loving Sophia. Our time together taught me more about myself than any other relationship. But now I know that I deserve to be with someone who is as committed to their principles and actions as they are in words. Because that, I believe, is what real love looks like. What do you think about the principle of consistency in relationships? Would you have made the same choice as Ellis, or given Sophia another chance? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life relationship stories. Share with a friend who might be struggling with similar issues in their own relationship. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth.